brick stitch is a stitch that confused me when I first started doing beadwork, because when you're attaching beads to it, instead of going through the beads to attach them the way you do in pretty much, well, I shouldn't say every other stitch, but in most other stitches, you're actually attaching by looping under the thread. And I was really suspicious of it at first, because I was like, can that really be strong enough to stand up over the long haul? I didn't like brick stitch. I'll just go out and say it. I just didn't plain like it, because it confused me. But over time, brick stitch and I have come to terms with each other. And there are some really good reasons to use brick stitch. One of which is that it gives you the peyote look, in that the beads will be offset, but the beads will be the holes will be going in a different direction. So with peyote, the holes are all going horizontally, but with brick stitch, you get the same look, but the holes are all going vertically, and that can make a difference in a designer's piece. Getting the beads oriented in the right direction can surprisingly be difficult sometimes. So let me show you how to do brick stitch and show you why it has won me over. Let's take a look at the beads. I've started out here with creating a little ladder stitch of beads, and I've already done a video on how to do ladder stitch, so if you need to know how to do that, I will pop a link up here for you to go ahead and learn that first, and then come on back and we'll do the brick stitch. So it doesn't matter whether this is an odd number or an even number of beads. You'll just create this however long you need it with your ladder stitch for your first row of brick stitch. Then for the first set of beads that you add on every row, you're going to pick up 2 beads instead of 1. All the rest of the stitches you'll pick up 1, but for your very first stitch you'll pick up 2 beads. And then what we're going to do is, you've got these threads, and here I'm going to kind of pull this out a little bit so that you can see it a little bit better, but there's this thread that's sitting right along this that's holding these 2 beads together, right? That's the thread that now I'm going to take my needle, and I'm just going to stick my needle underneath that thread. And so now the thread that was on my needle is now looped underneath the thread that is holding those 2 beads together. I'm going to pop right back up through the very first bead that's right above there. And now that just connected those 2 beads. To make this a little more solid, what you want to do is basically go around in between those 2 beads in the new row, and that will help solidify what's going on up there. All right, and then for the rest of this row, you're going to be picking up 1 bead at a time. So now to add my next bead, I'm picking up 1. I'm passing through the next, underneath, I shouldn't say through, underneath that next thread intersection right there. So it's the intersection between the next 2 beads over. I'm pulling that on through, and then just popping my needle back up through the bead that I just added. Here's one of the things to watch for as you're doing this, is you want to watch for, so I'm picking up 1, going underneath the intersection, the thread right there. Here's what to watch for. This happens at least a couple times per project when I'm working on brick stitch. When I go to pop my needle back up through the bead that I just added, I will accidentally catch my needle back underneath that thread, and what happens is the bead will just fall off. And that's normal. Everybody does it. So just know that that's normal for that to happen periodically. So if the bead falls off, it just means that you accidentally unhooked the thread connecting the first row together, and you'll just have to redo it. It's no big deal. What I like to do to try to keep that from happening is I hold a little tension on the thread that is my working thread here, and then I can kind of make this a nice tight intersection here as I'm trying to go back up through the bead. All right, we've got 1 more intersection here, so we'll add 1 more bead right here underneath the thread. This is a little bit fiddly to do when you are very first, so let me see if this is a good shot for you to see too, where the needle's going underneath the thread, not going through any beads right there. and then back up through the bead you just added. So it's a little fiddly for the first row or two when you don't have a whole lot to hold on to. Okay, so here we are. Notice how it's offset. If this were sitting this way, that would be that little peyote. You know, that would be your up bead and your down bead for the peyote. We just happen to be building it this way. So now that we've added the last bead to the last thread intersection here, we have to add, start a new row. Because I'm a creature of habit, I like to always work from right to left because I'm a righty. So I go ahead and flip my work so that I can now work in the same direction again. I'm going to start a new row, which means that I'm picking up 2 beads. First stitch of every new row is going to be 2 beads. You're still going to catch that very first intersection when you do that. Might have to encourage the beads to kind of sit the way you want them to. I'm going to pass back up through the bead that's directly overhead. And then because this is the first stitch of this new row and I added 2, what I want to do is back up and just circle around those 2 that I added. All right, and now you can see where that has now created the next piece of this almost peyote looking up bead and down bead kind of thing. And you'll just keep adding. So pick up 1, catch right under the next intersection, and then back up through the bead that you just added. And that is how you do brick stitch. Super easy. Once you get comfortable with the concept of looping under the thread, you'll realize it's just as strong as anything that you work with where you're actually passing through the bead. The thread is obviously what holds everything together anyway, so it really doesn't make a difference whether you're catching a thread or catching a bead. Brick stitch can be a little more supple than peyote stitch, especially in the tubular form. So for instance, if you wanted to make a bangle that had the look of peyote, a peyote stitch tube will be pretty solid and straight, where a brick stitch, because of the way it's built, has a lot more flexibility. And that's one of the reasons to use it, is if you're looking for more flexibility in a tubular shape. So practice your brick stitch. Don't be afraid of it. Happy beading.